Hello, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are joining us. Thank you so much for joining us for this virtual seminar. And I'm delighted that we are joined by Matthew Zimmerman from Far Sounder, Jennifer Smith from Shadowcat, Tony Gilbert from Seakeepers Society, and last and certainly not least, the man in red, Patrick Lahi from Triton Submarines. So we've got an hour ahead. I am Oliver Steeds, the moderator. I'm from Necton, the chief executive of Necton and the director of Ocean Census. Also, full disclosure, Necton are also the founders of Yachts for Science. Hopefully we'll have some of my colleagues from Yachts for Science joining. If we do, please put up a link in the chat area about Yachts for Science, because that's obviously going to relate to our conversations which we're going to have today. My role as the moderator is to ask the questions, to pose questions to our panel, to try and set the context of our conversations that we're going to have now, but also hopefully to turn this into something which is more of a conversation. So we're conscious that we are on broadcast a little bit with the initial part of our conversation. I'll be asking some questions, but then we'll be coming to you. So please feel free to put some questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring them, as will the panel guests, and we will then look to be able to answer some of those questions. So without further ado, let me try and set the scene a little bit about our conversation going forward. Now, as many of us all here know, no doubt, the ocean is the beating heart of our planet. It is our life support system. And as we're hearing in COP in the moment in Dubai, and we've heard increasingly year on year, it's looking like we're going to increasingly need to put our life support system on life support. Our ocean makes all life on Earth possible for us. And yet it is obviously suffering some of the extremes of the climate and the biodiversity crises that we face. Hopefully everyone here are massive advocates of the ocean, which is why we're here. And we're here to see what can we do to try and explore and protect our ocean better. And I'm going to be throwing some of those questions to our panel as well. Now, from a super yacht and a yacht perspective, as many of us know, there's about 11,000 vessels out there in the fleet that are 24 meters or more. There's about 500 or so fleets entering yachts entering the fleet each year, and a significant growth year on year. So this is an industry that is growing, and an industry that can have a profound contribution to the needs of science, exploration, and storytelling for the ocean. However, there is also a more difficult side, which we cannot ignore, particularly in conversations of this order, where in the last few years, the yacht industry and owners have found themselves increasingly in the spotlight, where people are starting to question the fleet's value and what contribution the fleets are making to society. One end of the spectrum, there's an increasing number of people who look at large yachts and see them as symbols of injustice and inequality. Those people and their voices will only increase in the years ahead as injustice and inequality, particularly as it relates to the climate and the biodiversity crisis, increases. So the role that yachts play in the future is going to come under increasing scrutiny, and that represents an opportunity, I believe, for the community to respond to that, to understand what the needs of people in the planet are, and to see what can we do to contribute. And there are lots of wonderful ways we can do that. And so we're going to come to each member of the panel in due course. Let me give you a quick introductions to a few people here to the panel, so you know who you're dealing with. And if there are particular questions that you would like me to ask to any of the individuals in particular, please do flag them. I'm not afraid to ask the questions. Some of you may know I used to be, prior to Necton, an investigative journalist and broadcast journalist. So we will be asking some difficult questions and hopefully make it slightly entertaining for you. We're very conscious and deeply appreciate the time you're giving us to participate today. So first of all, Far Sounder, whose navigation sonars enable yachts to navigate more safely. And these sonars can also help to build maps of everywhere around the seabed, which is there's a global program called Seabed 2030, which has a target to try and map the world's seabed by 2030. Pretty unlikely at this point, we're at 25%. But every ping from any vessel can be contributed to this database managed by the Nippon Foundation, JEBCO, Seabed 2030. So please look at that as well. Shadowcat, full disclosure as well. We are working together on helping to develop and apply apply some design for these incredible vessels to be able to support science. Now, Shadowcat are developers of bespoke catamaran support and adventure vessels, starting at the 68-meter award-winning MY Hodor, if that's the right pronunciation. And Shadowcat has pledged that their vessels will be designed for varying levels of passive and active support for the critical sciences required to understand and protect the oceans. Thank you, Shadowcat. And now you've made that commitment, we're going to be holding you to account to ensure you do that. And we need to find clients for you who also want to support that. We also have Seakeepers joining us as well. And Seakeepers receive vessels from owners and make them available for scientists, I believe. We'll come back with a little bit more information in a moment. And then finally, we have Patrick Lai from Triton Submarines. Again, in full disclosure, we at Necton do partner with Patrick and with Triton and use their submersibles for scientific research. Patrick and Triton have built submersibles that range from this a couple hundred meters down to full ocean depth. And a range of different submersibles which are used on yachts as well as cruise vessels and purposefully built for scientific exploration as well, such as the Great Full Ocean Depth submersible. So delighted to welcome you all here with us all. Let's start with some of the easy questions before we tackle some of those more difficult issues which I mentioned before. What I'd like to hear from each of you, if I may, first is why you feel yachts can participate in scientific inquiry, scientific exploration, conservation action, storytelling, and in different aspects. If we can keep the questions short, we keep the answers short, then we can get through more questions. I want these questions really to be a seed to stimulate conversation with our community and for you to share some of your insights as leaders of the industry. So let's start with Matthew, if we may. Why should yachts participate with scientific research and start to support those activities?
Well, so many of these yachts are going places that are exciting, and that often means because they're relatively unknown. And if they're unknown, it means they haven't been studied before. So there's a tremendous opportunity to either passively collect information along the way without changing anything in their day-to-day activities, all the way up to actively engaging specially designed equipment and specialist scientists on board. You brought up oceans, mapping the oceans with Seabed 2030 in your introduction. Thank you. Farsounder, along with a number of other great companies and organizations around the world, are official partners with them. And the goal is to map the world's oceans. And it's not just yachts. There's official hydrographic surveys, oil exploration, but yachting community can play a great role there. And if everybody pitches in, we can certainly make a dent in studying that. So I'm a big proponent of, if you're going to go there anyways, what can you do along the way to at least collect data and information that's really relevant and important to scientists around the world? Because it's a no-brainer. Why not do those things, especially if it doesn't cost you anything, take any time, add any risk, etc.
Thank you, Matthew. Yes, I think very good points, and I think we're going to come into a little bit more detail later about actually what is some of the data which can be captured, how can people actually participate in a practical sense, what are some of those barriers to participation which some people may have as well, and how can we overcome them. So we're going to get into some of those practical details, we're going to get into more practical examples of what can be done. So keeping it top level at this point as well, the role that the yachts can play. Jennifer.
I love the question of why. If we were cynical about it, we could talk about the really negative optics that are focused on the yachting world right now. But I think in reality, there's much better, more pure, more realistic reasons. 3 of them. We've got the number of vessels. We have got the volume of ships that can really cover the planet. We have the resources, the crew, the money, the equipment already on these vessels. And there is, quite frankly, the will and the desire amongst the owners to do something, to presume that there's real resistance amongst these decision makers is not accurate in our experience.
Thank you, Jennifer. Coming to Tony.
Yeah, and going off of what Jennifer just said, I mean, I can attest to that for having done this for a little over 6 years. I wouldn't have facilitated all the expeditions that I have without the willingness of the owners, the captains, the crew. Now it's an easy sell for the crew, obviously, to go on these sort of adventures of discovery and conservation. The owners, again, like Jennifer said, I think there's this perceived sort of hesitation, but really that's not the case. And many of them have just as much of a want and a desire as they should, because why do they have these boats and these yachts if not to enjoy this environment? And if they just kind of let it fall by the wayside, then they'll have nothing to enjoy or for future generations. So I think we're finding out, and it's a pleasant surprise that the yachting or the yacht owner community is definitely behind this.
Thank you, Tony. Patrick, coming to you now with your experience.
Yeah, so while it's easy to sort of throw rocks at the yachting community as being an assemblage of wealthy individuals that are sitting at the top of the sort of financial heap and not doing a whole lot to change this sort of perceived inequity. And certainly I can't comment on the inequities that exist, financially in our world. But what I can say is, in my experience, we've seen that yacht owners, by and large, are people who are interested in the ocean. In some cases, they're passionately interested in the ocean. They have the financial wherewithal to afford the vessels that allow them to travel around on the ocean. In many cases, their passions extend so far that they're also keen divers and they have an adventurous spirit. And many of them are, ardent, passionate ocean advocates, people who really care about what's going on in the ocean space, as evidenced by the financial investment they're making in their vessels. The mere existence of submersibles on yachts, I think, is a great example of how far many yacht owners have been prepared to take it. And the thing that we're most proud of at Triton is how many of our clients are now using their subs to meaningfully contribute to scientific research and exploration projects around the world. It's fantastic. If you think about it, scientists often don't have access to these kind of platforms. And knowing that there are wealthy individuals, admittedly, but who have these extraordinary vessels and are willing to make them available along with the equipment that they're fitting to them, means that you provide an opportunity for the scientific community that didn't exist before. And that, I think, is quite compelling. And what we can do with it is extraordinary. And, you can attest to that because you have prosecuted many missions involving these vessels that have allowed you to enhance and further our knowledge and understanding of the ocean.
Absolutely. And as we know, there is a very large fleet of these vessels around the world. And the owners, of course, are people who spend a lot of time on the ocean, as do the crews. So they represent, and many of them are great ambassadors for the ocean already. And as you mentioned, Patrick, and others have mentioned, it does represent an extraordinary opportunity for people to learn more about the ocean through their vessels, on their vessels, with scientists participating as well during their expeditions and their journeys which they undertake. And I think there are obviously lots of good reasons why yachts should participate, and we're not going to get stuck on the negative side. That is the perception that is real, and it's out there, whether people agree with it or not. But there is great opportunity for leadership by the yacht community, and that's what I think we want to be focusing on today. and how can we harness the vessels, the fleets, the crews, the owners to do more for the ocean. We're all big ocean advocates. We want to see more people out there learning about the ocean. We know what the science is telling us, and we know that we need more scientists out there having access to vessels and access to the ocean. If we look at it from the UK point of view only, there's a success rate of just 4% of applications for vessel time. So it's a very small number. And we're in a privileged position in the UK. If you look at middle and low income nations, it's far, far less. We know that if we want to be able to progress our understanding of the ocean, we want to sustain our futures on the planet, we need far more information, far more understanding of how the ocean is changing. So we can inform policy, we can inform the public, and we can drive it forward. And we've got a network of extraordinary ambassadors that can achieve that. So I want to get into a bit more of the details now on who can actually participate in ocean science. And I'm looking for practical examples from each of you of ideally things that you've done. Just one example, and we'll go into those a little bit further. But practical examples where you have seen, we've worked with vessels, you've worked with owners, you've worked with crews, and talk us through how that worked, what was achieved, and why it worked in particular. Because what we want to draw out is inspiration for the community of people that are watching to say, we could do that as well. So give us one example each. Now, we'll start with Jennifer, if we can, first up.
Well, I'm going to borrow a little bit from Matt's. This was very simple, very uncomplicated. At the outset of the build and design of one of our vessels, we specified the far sounder equipment into the spec. It's very simple to integrate. This now enables that vessel to passively, without having to have special staff, special resources, kind of blindly contribute that data and that information to Matthew, who's able to make use of it.
Thanks, Jennifer.
In a practical example, so let me just pick up on that. If one's gathering data about the seabed, this could potentially be sensitive data for a government, to a fishing fleet, or to others. So how do owners manage that to ensure they're not breaking the law and they're contributing things which are in value? Is there a way of anonymizing things of that order so things can be done in a responsible manner, or is that not required at all?
Yeah,
maybe something for you,
Oliver. There's a lot of ways that this can
good question.
easily be handled without having any burden on the crews and the owners. So our equipment is really been designed to let you know what's out in front of the vessel before you get there from a navigation point of view. Our original motivation was, how do we avoid hitting whales? How do we avoid hitting rocks, causing oil spills? And so, our users are using it to avoid things like ice and whales and rocky pinnacles and coral, even shipping containers and all sorts of other unmarked things. Really, the goal of this was how to enable them to navigate safely, because a lot of these yacht guests want to get to these exclusive places, and how can we get them there with minimal impact? But along the way, instead of throwing away all of that data, because we're looking out ahead of the vessel, but also building a map of everywhere you've been, we have the ability to actually store that data on board the far sounder system. And then when the crew chooses, they can synchronize that with a cloud service to anonymously make their contributions and then pull down data from the rest of the far sounder fleet. And through our cloud service, we also contribute data anonymously to the IHO and Seabed 2030. The IHO is a global, basically the global body that's in charge of standards and regulations for charting. One of their initiatives is bringing in crowdsourced data, so stuff from the community that can be contributed. And all of that data gets passed on to Seabed 2030. The way the IHO handles this is, by default, everything's anonymous. So you don't have to say what your vessel is. You don't have to say who you are. You just have to submit the data, and we do that for you. And then where can they do this and where can they not do this? Well, the IHO handles that all internally. They basically have permissions from all of the member states around the world. And for anywhere that is opting into this capability, that data is shared to the global community at no charge. So there is nothing that the operators of our vessels have to even think about once they're hooked into our system to make these contributions.
Thank you.
From our customers, they're excited about that, but they don't want to do anything extra along the way. So we handle all of the privacy and anonymity for them.
So playing devil's advocate, and we'll come to others in a moment. There's a lot of ocean out there. 75% of it hasn't been mapped at the moment. How are a few pings from a few vessels actually contributing? Why is this really making a difference? Why do people actually need to contribute in this way?
Well, it's not just Far Sounder contributors, it's everyone. And there's a number of other organizations in the yachting community that are doing this. Seakeepers, you're playing a great role using these data archivers that plug into your existing echo sounder systems. There's commercial entities that are doing this. Fugro, who does a lot of commercial surveys for oil and gas exploration and communications, subsea cables, they've donated a ton of survey data. We will never get there if nobody participates. But if everybody participates, we can start chunking through that. There's a statistics that Seabed 2030 loves to talk about and is really dramatic, that we've mapped 99% of the surface of Mars at 6-meter resolution, and we've mapped just under 25% of the Earth's oceans at only 100-meter resolution. So we have a long way to go. And that baseline map serves as the background information for everything else, whether it's biology, whether it's climate, whether it's weather. It's sort of a baseline background information that's needed for all sorts of scientific study.
Thank you, Matthew. So what I'm hearing is that we need a network of vessels out there, all contributing in whatever way they're able to, if we're actually going to be able to advance the mapping of the ocean. If we look at, we're involved in it as well. And yes, there are some large research vessels out there. There's a lot of government data, which is obviously being withheld. There's commercial data. A few like Fugro are sharing it, but a lot aren't. So we still have a long way to go. And if we look at the needs of the ocean and we look at the contribution that technology like this can provide in a pretty simple manner, it all helps. So it's straightforward to do, and every ping matters in short. So coming to you, Patrick, now, where are you seeing how, whether that's with the use of submersibles in particular and the ability to get people under below the surface to explore and understand the ocean, where are you starting to see how people can actually participate in ocean science from a yacht perspective and what they can do in this regard?
Well, I think we're quite fortunate at Triton to have many clients who are interested in advancing our knowledge and understanding of the ocean. Even if they may have bought a sub initially for recreation, many of them have diversified and are now using their subs to prosecute really ambitious science missions. And, just to continue to use a contemporary example, there are so many examples I could cite, but to use a couple of contemporary examples, number one, I think of the Five Deeps expedition, which started off as, you could call it, this is a vanity project. This is a guy that wants to dive to the deepest point in each of the 5 oceans. But what was accomplished along the way was something you could say it was an unintended consequence. It was happenstance, but it was a lot more than that. I think it was a conscious decision on the part of the individual who was funding the expedition, Victor Vescovo, to provide the vessel or to equip the vessel with the scientific tools and equipment that he needed to prosecute his mission, but at the same time could be used to do a whole lot more. And during the course of that 10-month expedition, we mapped 750,000 kilometers, square kilometers of deep ocean. This is parts of the ocean that most people aren't even interested in. So these are areas of the ocean that lie between 6,000 and 10,000 meters. We collected something like 400,000 scientific samples, identified 40 new species. And that was not the primary mission objective. The primary mission objective was to dive to the deepest point in each of the 5 oceans. But an added benefit was all of the science that happened along the way. All that mapping, by the way, was, I understood, gifted to the JEBCO database and added to. So that's just one example.
Thank you. And, I think reflecting on that as well, what we saw with Victor with the Five Deeps was someone who was going on a journey and he had a purpose, as owners of vessels do, or submersibles. But it was the journey and the experience of being below the surface, the ability to spend more time at sea. But with the submersibles, with the transparent pressure holes, which your submersibles and other manufacturers have, that gives people eyes on what life is really like below the surface, and be able to travel into those environments with scientists who can actually help guide you in those environments is also pretty key. And we've seen what happens, particularly with Victor, in this case, what can happen from a transformative basis if people are given those opportunities and they apply their vessels and their technology in that particular way. And what we've seen with Victor is that the contributions have radically advanced hadal science, the deep bits below 6,000 meters, and I think are the single largest private contribution to the seabed mapping program, Seabed 2030, over the last few years, and that's now being continued with Inkfish as well. So there's
you're a great example, Oliver, of how impactful a dive can be. An experience in a human occupied vehicle. I mean, it leaves an indelible impression. And I recall vividly the dive that you made in 2011, I think it was 12 years ago, and how it impacted you. In fact, I don't know if we have the video, but if we did, I would love to share that video of you after you got out of the submarine and you described what the experience was like to you and what impression it had made. I don't know. Yeah, there we go.
How can you explain something like this? There's no sensible way of saying it. Something's just got to be experienced to be believed. There aren't words good enough. There's nothing sensible I can possibly say. It is just fucking awesome, those things. That's what we need. An armada of them. We need hundreds of these submersibles out there. We need to get kids in there. We need to get scientists in there. We need to get government leaders in there to really connect with the oceans. People to start thinking blue. There's nothing I've ever experienced that helps people think blue. Helps me think blue. Helps me understand what the oceans are all about. Why our oceans are so important. Our oceans are in complete collapse. The only way we're going to solve this problem is if people start thinking blue, acting blue, and living blue. And that's got to start with submersibles like this. We've got to get people in the ocean, people to experience what our oceans are all about. Because without that, our life systems are going to collapse. We are going to die. It's that simple. The science is that categorical. We need to connect with our oceans, and there is no better way to connect with our oceans than in extraordinary submersibles like that. They're just fucking awesome!
I mean, even when I watch your face and just, how, excited you were about what you had just seen, and look at the impact that you've now made in the intervening 12 years and the missions that you've prosecuted as Necton. They've been extraordinary.
Yes, and it did start there. That was when I was reporting for NBC back in the day. Well, obviously, if one undertakes marine expeditions, you age quickly, as you can see in that transition from, and you get a lot more grey hair. So thank you for that, Patrick. I hold you responsible in many ways for many of those things. But just in summary there, giving people the opportunity and providing more opportunity for owners and as well as crew to learn more about the ocean, does have transformative effect and builds and starts to snowball as well. So it's not just, if you're not doing it, then start it. So coming to Tony now at Seakeepers, can you give us a practical example of where Seakeepers have helped and worked with yachts and their crews to support ocean science?
Yeah, I think giving one example is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do because there's way too many that come to mind. We have Patrick here from Triton. We have Matthew and Jennifer who have worked together to map the ocean floor. We're doing all of that, and we're doing it with this incredible. I think you mentioned 11,000 yachts in the world. We've contributed 1/5 of the boats that are contributing data to Seabed 2030 have come from us divvying out these data loggers to the yachting community. What else? We've used submersibles, Triton submersibles, or at least rather the scientists have used them to put acoustic receivers down on the seamounts between Cocos Island and the Galapagos, which is some very, very important conservation work for the sharks that migrate along that corridor. And we look to do that again in 2024. What else? Whale research, shark research, coral reef research. We've kind of had our hand in all of it. That's all due to the contributions from the yachting community. So yeah, I couldn't give just one, but those are kind of just general categories in which it's really worked out.
Right. So looking at the data loggers, just give us a sense of scale there. You mentioned sort of a fifth of all that data. How many data loggers have Seakeepers distributed then to the yacht fleet?
At this point, and we're still counting, but I think we're up to about 80 that we've distributed out to 80 different yachts. And like I said, sorry,
and looking at the larger vessels as well, the say vessels over 60 meters, large vessels which have particular capability and capacity for being able to contribute to some of the larger scientific questions. What kind of scale of or number of expeditions, science expeditions, have Seakeepers there been able to mount with those kind of vessels?
Well, with those, and unsurprisingly, those are more few and far in between. It is more difficult to kind of nail down the bigger yachts. However, we have done more than a few over the years. If I had to try to put a number to it, with the larger boats, it would be something akin to about 50, give or take. But what's interesting, and this goes back to a previous question you had asked of who can participate in these initiatives, and I actually saw this in one of the chat questions. And if you have a 28-foot center console boat, you can absolutely help science and conservation initiatives. If you have a 60-foot yacht, at that point, you can start calling them yachts. You can accommodate a group of 4 scientists for 2 weeks if you'd like to, which we've done. And then, of course, the bigger the boat gets, the more the opportunities to contribute to science and conservation increase, and you can do more. And we definitely want to recruit as many large, super mega yachts, whatever you want to call them. We've done a decent job at least going out there and getting the word out and getting more than interested. But when you start to try to coordinate these long scale trips aboard these bigger boats, it gets a little more difficult, but it's happening, and that's the amazing thing. So there's no boat too small, definitely no boat too big, and anyone in between can participate.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. I mean, there are some vessels, as we've heard there, from different sizes, can all be involved. Please do look at Yachts for Science as well. You'll see there that there are science projects which are registered. For example, if you're a vessel owner and if you're going into any of the Falklands Islands, for example, there's people looking for 2 to 3 berths there for 3 or 4 days to do some zooplankton research. There's a reef survey program in the Cayman Islands, 6 berths, 2 days. Sargasso and plastic sampling around Bermuda, berths overnight for just a couple of days. Cryptic corals in Tahiti Islands for 2 to 4 scientists for 1 week. There are plenty of these projects which are listed in different platforms, be they Seakeepers, Yachts for Science, where there are a host of scientific programs and projects out there in different places around the world which are looking for matches, and that's what Yachts for Science does as well, is making those making those matches occur. So if you want to register, you can register your vessel and say you're going to be in a certain place, then we can try and find you the science projects which will fit. If you have a particular interest in a particular area of research, again, we can try and hook you up in that way. So what I want to get into now is some of the perceived barriers to participation. In each of your different areas, you have different expertise. And I think one of the concerns people may have looking at this, sounds very good. Yes, we want to be able to do it, but there are these problems. There are these barriers that we need to overcome. So I just want each of you to tackle one of those perceived barriers to show that there are ways around it, whether it be about privacy or liability or safety or burdens on the crew. I would like each of you to take one and show an example, practical example of where that's been overcome and how, in a short way. And then we'll wrap up with a few conclusions, and then we'll come to some questions. So who wants to start? Or I'm going to pick on somebody again. Patrick, you're looking rather set back, showing off your watch and hairy arms. Why don't you step?
Thank you, Oliver. Happy to answer the question. Of course, the significant barrier that exists with one of our products, and of course, I I'm always singularly focused on those because, I'm not that bright, truth be told. So I can't help but think about them. They're big, they're heavy, they're expensive. You need a fairly significant vessel to be able to pick them up, launch them, recover them, and support them. So I suppose the barriers to entry would include, cost, and then, having a vessel that's large enough and and equipped with a launch and recovery system that allows them to get on and off
But once, assuming people have overcome those barriers, once they're being operated and things, what's the barrier for the owner, the crew, to actually use them for science?
Well, I think the barriers are really not significant at all. I mean, the thing about our subs is, they're incredibly versatile. They can be equipped with a whole array of scientific tools and equipment to enhance their capacity to, meaningfully support scientific research. So it could be anything from as simple as a sample basket that you can throw things into and document where you pick them up from, to more sophisticated equipment. And really, I think it's limited by the imagination and the appetite of the owners that have them. I mean, great examples are when you think of, Aleutian and how it started out as essentially a vessel, a yacht, but with the capacity to be used for science. I don't think that when they began their mission, they had any idea of the trajectory that they were on. You now go aboard the Ocean Explorer, which I think is perhaps one of the most advanced, if not the most advanced ocean research vessel out there. It's extraordinary. You feel like you've stepped into the future. So he's taken it to a whole different level. But it certainly began, more humbly with fewer tools and equipment, and expanded as their interest and as their appetite increased for it. And as they began to realize the profound impact that these vessels and the scientific missions that they were prosecuting and documenting could have. When you start filming huge documentaries that millions of people watch, you're getting a level of engagement that goes way beyond, just whoever happens to be on the vessel. You think of Blue Planet, that documentary was watched by 4 billion people. And that's engagement. That's how you create advocacy. That's where you're going to be able to create a groundswell of support for these types of initiatives.
We'll have to fact check your 4 billion, because that's obviously there's how many people in the world?
Well, a lot more than that. But that's what I've heard. I don't know.
Okay. Anyway, we got to
I've told you a million times,
Oliver,
not to exaggerate.
Thank you, Patrick. So coming to Jennifer, if I may, because as we look at how we're going to overcome barriers to entry, barriers to participation, Shadowcat have started, have looked at that from the ground up, from the design basis up, to be able to look at how vessels can actually be from the ground up, from the design phase through their whole application, to be used in some regard for science. So talk us through how you've looked to address and overcome some of these barriers.
Well, where that came from was really feedback from owners after they'd already taken delivery of their vessels, asking, what can we do? How can we do it? So the crusade that we are on, and this is across the whole design and build industry, we spoke quite a lot about this at METS this year, is we're trying to normalize these things being built in, not being the first things that get value engineered out of a project, that there is an obligation for as many of these vessels as possible that hit the water to be geared up for what we call effortless engagement. That's sort of the motto of how we want to do this. We want to make that as easy as possible for the owners to just flip a switch, say, yes, by all means, that's a compression chamber on one of our vessels. Those are now in collapsible form that are quite effective. So they take up a much smaller footprint. You saw the sub garage a moment ago where we have all those things stored in. So what we did was go out to the community. We went to the science community. We engaged, that's how we met Oliver originally. Went to folks like Triton that create all of this equipment and said, what is your ideal vessel? What do you always need to be able to have this equipment or do this valuable work? And we piled all of that into what we now have as a base specification. Obviously, not everybody's going to have a submarine. but everybody can have a far sounder. Everybody can have a space that has some flexibility. So you can, our vessels at least, you can add scientists when you need to. You've got extra space for expeditions to join a vessel. You have got a space that can be devoted as a dry lab video editing space. You've got hospital facilities. You've got some level of decompression so you can support these dive operations, which they all involve. Mm-hmm. So we've made the pledge that it's not going to be the first thing on the chopping block. That, you know, inevitably when those conversations come up and you're building a bespoke vessel, that if there's a need to look at things that aren't critical, we, as has been the habit, are not going to volunteer those areas that mean the most to the future work we can accomplish amongst the fleet.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. I think, yeah, into the applied aspects of Shadowcat and what we've heard also from Tony and Matthew and Patrick, there are a huge number of different activities that can be undertaken off yachts, and building them in from the start, from the creation of vessels, but also considering how they can be adapted, and I'll come back to that in a moment, are all important. You know, some of those activities, to give you a bit more of a flavor of those, it can be dive support for coral research. We know what's happening to our reefs. It's tagging megafauna, sharks, rays, and whales, for example, gathering climate or meteorological data. Specific samples, whether it be water or just taking a water sample, you can then you can evaluate the environmental DNA, i.e. the DNA of animals which have been swimming through the water, so you can get a biodiversity assessment from that analysis. Or you can start to deploy small camera technologies on landers or BRUVs, which are baited remote underwater vehicles. Small AUVs can also be launched off vessels. All these things can have application for scientists, as you've heard. Matthew, coming to you now. Can you describe a barrier which you have overcome, which has allowed a vessel and a crew to be able to participate in a practical way, which people can look at and be inspired by and go, yes, great. That's it.
I always like to come back to what can the quote everyday yacht do to participate. You know, the huge, exciting, super public efforts that you've been part of and Patrick's been part of. Those are awesome, and those really engage the community, which makes a lot of people want to do something. But when you don't have those capabilities, what else can you do? And there's a lot of sensors on board that have valuable information. Okay, I obviously like depth because that's what my company makes. But there's other observations that are valuable. Whale sightings. Whales are fantastic, amazing animals. If you've had the chance to get close to them, it's really, really exciting and cool experience. But you can report where you've seen them and when, not only for regulatory issues, but for scientists to understand the health of those populations and where they're going. There's trash that you can cite and share those observations of where you found trash, what types, and the locations to help understand not only the oceanographic gyres and how the oceans are moving, but where should our cleanup efforts be focused. So I think it's important to understand that you don't have to do a lot to be able to make meaningful contributions. I think there are some people that wonder, hey, if I don't have a 100-meter yacht with subs and submersibles and ROVs and dive chambers, can I actually do something that's valuable? And I think the answer is yes. And also, as importantly, I think that's exciting for the crew. As I'm sure a lot of us here on the panel and in the audience know, there's a huge question of where are all the crew going to come from to sustain the growth of the yachting industry. And nearly every crew that's part of an exciting activity, doing science, it's really engaging them in their positions in their careers. And I think that translates dramatically into retention. Owners and management companies are wondering, how can I keep the good crew that I have? Well, a lot of crew are saying, I don't want to just work on a white boat, I want to also be able to contribute to something else. So it's not just the guests that are getting engaged, but it's also the crew that are getting engaged. And that's breaking down a barrier of how to keep operating these vessels by retaining your crew. So there's lots of sides to this same picture.
Very good point. Thank you, Matthew. So, conscious of time, we've been cracking through, and I want to come to some of the questions which have been posted. Thank you for your questions and joining us. I'm going to throw some of these to different members of the panel, if I may. Before I do, there are some questions which are quite technical focused, so we're not going to be able to get into those. I hope these are being recorded by the team and they'll be able to respond to specific things. We want to try and keep it as general as we can, things which... So a question for you, Tony. This come in from Haman Haluza. Apologies if I got that one wrong, but thank you, Haman Haluza. The question is, to whom would you report observations if one does not have high-level equipment?
To whom would you report? So that's a great question. There are already certain projects and initiatives set up for citizen scientists to be able to record and report whatever, like Matthew was just describing. If you are part of a project that is trying to observe whale sightings and where and which species you're seeing, so it really depends on the subject matter. But that's something that we at Seakeepers actually have is an entire department is citizen science. And in that department, we have at least, 5 projects and counting different types of citizen science that people can do. So again, and that's what we kind of specialize in, is rather than just having a very limited amount of scientists that we work with, we try to see if we can get as many projects going with as many boats as possible. So yeah, I would say they would have to just reach out to me, and then we can get them set up with someone.
Great, thank you. And just to add to that as well, I think if you are in different parts of the world, then that information is going to be of interest and relevance to that local community, to that local scientific community. So your crew should be able to engage with the Port Authority, and if it relates to cetaceans or plastics or whatever, they should be able to point you in the right direction and go, okay, talk to that university, talk to that group, or whatever. They will have a conduit or be able to provide you with the direction at a local level. And it's that local level engagement as well, at a community base, at a scientific base, at a national level, which is really critical internationally, rather than what's called parachute science, where international experts come in, take the data and walk off, where it no longer has much relevance for the local community who actually need it. So another question. Pink Flamingo Society. Patrick, is that a group you know about? Is that something?
I do not know much about them, except that it's a group of like-minded people who are passionate about the ocean science and exploration, and looking at ways to further our knowledge and understanding of the ocean. I don't know enough about it to be able to comment intelligently, unfortunately, about it.
I can. So the Pink Flamingo Society, that is a group of philanthropically funded ocean research vessel operators. So you have people like the Schmidt Ocean Institute, Rev Ocean, Terra Ocean. We are a part of
Ocean X.
Yeah, Ocean X. I'm sorry. Yeah. And a couple others that aren't really coming to mind right now, but and all those that I just listed are doing amazing, incredible things for ocean science.
Inkfish.
And what they've been able to do through some really great funding is have one large vessel that can go anywhere, do anything. But as you might imagine, they have to vet how many scientists they let on a year, and really kind of they can't do it all. And that's where I think the uniqueness of the Seakeepers and Yachts for Science model is that rather than have one boat that can only be in one place at one time doing one thing at a time, we're able to sort of employ the vastness that is the international yacht fleet, and get a lot of things done all within one time period. But yeah, that's what Pink Flamingos is, and they're They're awesome. We all just have different ways of doing the one common goal, which is ocean science and conservation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. There's a question which I'd like to share with Jennifer, if I may, which is what about the control that can be pursued in the process of yachts building in order to obtain sustainability directly in the use of material? That's quite a technical question. It's around sustainability in building rather than the general sort of more general conversation which we're having around ocean science, but it does bear mention briefly, please, just on the importance of sustainability within design and operation, if we can sort of tackle it in a more broad sense.
Well, and it would be disingenuous of us to really focus on one and not the other. These are not mutually exclusive, in our opinion. Very quick anecdote, probably about 1.5 years ago, when we were developing some other concepts, we reached out to somebody in our community who I'm sure everybody would know, a big thought leader in sustainability and alternate fuels and all those things, and said, introduced myself. It's great to meet you. We followed you for quite a while. We'd love to have an exchange about how to make these vessels better and stronger and more sustainable. And he said, well, personally, I think shadow boats are part of the problem, but I'm happy to talk. So we really took that to heart and went back out on this search. We employed a tremendous amount of sustainable features. The Sustain concept vessel was sustainable in its purpose, which is supporting science and making sure we were built for that, and also sustainable in its operation with some new engine tech that was able to, reduce emissions, eliminate emissions without using SCRs and urea and all these other polluting byproducts. We're developing some future fuel vessels with hydrogen creating vessels, in addition to vessels that'll run on alternative fuels in the short term, as well as heat recapture and progressive waste management integrations that mean nothing but clean water goes over the side of the vessel. So we feel strongly that those things have to coexist, that we have to be looking at both directions, and welcome and encourage the challenges from the community to make sure we are walking our talk with everything that we're putting out on the water.
Thank you, Jennifer. A question coming in from Sophia, the Eco Viewfinder. Maybe this one for Matthew. Can older vessels get involved in these efforts? Obviously, there's an applied version of through Far Sounder, but do you have a sense of more widely as well in terms of how older vessels can be utilized for science as well as the application?
Absolutely. So if you are talking about the Seabed 2030 initiative, CID makes these fantastic little data loggers that plug into your existing NEMA 2000 bus. I believe, Tony, those are the data collectors that you're currently using. The founder of CID, Kenneth, he is a colleague of mine on the IHO's Crowdsourced Bathymetry Working Group. It's a small little box that's easy to retrofit. For big sonars like ours, we do about 50% refits, so that's possible as well. But all of these observations, whether it's depth or anything else, just requires observing. So sea surface temperature, marine mammal sightings, meteorological information, those are all observations that are on board the oldest vessels as well. I mean, your eyes are the most basic observation tools, and those are valuable observations for a lot of scientific endpoints.
Thank you very much. So we've got another sort of 5 minutes if we're going to wrap up on at 11:30, I think it is Eastern, which is 4:30 UK, and whatever else time it is wherever you are in the world. I'm sure you'll be on a different clock as well. So a couple more questions. I'm going to turn it around instead of there are some other questions here which we do need to answer, but we're not going to. But what I'm going to want each of you to do is just to wrap up in 1 minute each in terms of your thoughts from where you're seeing your part of the industry and what you would like to see the industry, the community, crews, vessels, operators do more of in support of ocean science. One thing which you would like to see more of happen and why they should do it. You've got a minute each, and then we'll wrap at the bottom. So we'll start with Jennifer.
Okay. All right. I know exactly what I'm going to say on this. I would encourage everybody who is in the audience today to reach out to any of us, reach out to anybody else that we've made reference to in this conversation who's doing this work, and get some support in finding a way to present this to your decision makers. Let us help you, help yourself, and help the planet with giving you these tools. You know, whether it is helping you create a table that illustrates everything from highly, highly passive, low dollar ways to contribute up to full on, you know, support and sponsorship of expeditions. We can help you do that. We can help you create this matrix that you can present to the decision makers and the people who are writing your checks, and help you get something implemented in the short term and in the long term.
Well said, Jennifer. Thank you very much. Coming to Tony now.
Yeah. So I think, sometimes people don't know what they like and what they want until it's presented to them. I think one thing that I want to see a little more of is the yacht support companies out there, travel agencies, expedition creating companies, all those kinds of people in the industry. If they sort of let their charter customers know, hey, you can have a scientist or a group of scientists with you on your charter, or you can join a scientific expedition that's already being developed and coordinated. If that as an opportunity is just a little more widely put out there by those that are supporting and catering to the chartering community, then we'll probably see a lot more of these expeditions happen. Because and going back to the hurdles, one of the hurdles is that if the owner's using it, or if they have charter clients, then they feel that they cannot loan out their boat for science. But if we can combine the two, then I think that's probably going to be a huge help.
Well said, Tony. Thank you very much. Coming to Matthew next. Enabling ocean science, the role of the yachting community.
I think a common thing that we've talked about here, but not really named explicitly, is collaboration. Whether that is bringing scientists and vessels together through Yachts for Science or Seakeeper Society, or it's manufacturers of vessels like Shadowcat that is making it by default interoperability between their equipments and having the facilities on board. I think collaboration is key. Talking to scientists, they do their best work by collaborating with other scientists in their institution and around the world. And I think that the operators in the yachting industry, the manufacturers, the businesses, the service suppliers, personally, I think it's interesting when I get to help enable science with my equipment. I'm not a scientist, but I like making it possible for scientists to do things. That's fun for me. That benefits the world. And I think collaboration is a win-win for the science, the people involved, and the people that get to participate.
Thank you, Matthew. Well said. Collaboration, we need more of it there. It's a very large ocean. We've got one planet, and we know that if we want to succeed in the outcomes we need for the future and future generations, we've got to work together more. And that involves us as a community doing that. Patrick, not the final word. I'm going to have the final word. Everyone be glad to hear. You've got
as you should. As you should. Well, I agree with the idea of collaboration. I think we need more of it. We live in a very exciting time where advances in technology and material science and analytical software, electronics, battery technology, all of these things are making it possible for us to build better stuff, whether it's better equipment to collect scientific data, or subs that are capable of doing more to contribute meaningfully to science expeditions. I guess I would like to encourage more people to consider the ocean as a career. I think getting young people inspired to become engaged with the ocean, whether it's to become a crew member on a yacht, become a scientist, become an engineer. But I think for too long, people haven't really thought about oceanic careers. And I think our oceans, which, as we've discussed, are in peril, really need more of our attention, not less of it. And a great way to do that is to get more people, young people, engaged And I think an excellent way to do that is to continue to provide the kind of films and documentaries, many of Oliver, the ones like you've created, that inspire young people, as I was inspired by people like Cousteau. And I know I'm aging myself, but sitting there in front of the TV and watching those documentaries on the weekend is really what got me involved in this and got me interested in pursuing an oceanic career. And I hope we can, as a group, as a community, encourage more people to do just that. Thank
you, Patrick. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Tony. And hopefully, and thank you all for joining us for this round table, enabling ocean science, the role of the yachting community. Well, we've covered a bit of ground, a lot of ground quickly, some in depth, some in the shallow water, so to speak. Why this is so vital, why there's an opportunity, why we need to do it, who can participate, how people can participate, and how people can start to overcome some of those barriers for participation. The long and short of it, I think, is if you ever need any motivation for what we need to do, go and read a science paper, because that's what I have to read every day. And the news isn't pretty. If you turn to a place like COP, that might either give you hope or fear. Wherever it is, I believe we need more hope. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, and we need to give people more dreams. If you can get people out on the sea, people are going to fall in love with the sea. If more people fall in love with the sea, they're going to want to protect the sea. So there's a simple way, and this is the view of my daughter, 10-year-old Marina, who I asked the same question to. How do we get more ocean science involved in the role of the yachting community? She said, quite simply, do people like to breathe? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, every second breath comes from the ocean, Daddy. You told me that. And I said, that's true. She said, well, go and tell everyone that if they want to stop breathing, then they can stop. They better well stop using their yachts then. So if you like breathing, get out to sea, get more people out there, get scientists with you to show them to be able to reveal the majesty and wonder of the ocean, as well as the peril alongside it. Take them on those journeys, enable them to do the frontier work which they need to do, because they can push back the frontiers of our knowledge that we desperately need now. We have a critical lack of understanding of our ocean. If we look at it from the amount of ocean life, which underpins all life on Earth at the moment, 10% of all life is known on the ocean. 90%, the rest of life that makes all life possible, is unknown to us. How can we protect what we don't know exists? Is very, very difficult. So we know there's a need. We know we have the capability. We know we have the will. We know we have the resources, some of the most extraordinary resources available on the planet. We know there is time available on the vessels, and we know there's great willing. So please, hopefully this has been an inspiration to you. Thank you again, Jennifer, Matthew, Tony, and Patrick, for your inspiration. And now we pass the baton over to you, the audience, those who are working at sea, to try and find more ways to get more science and conservation work undertaken at sea. So signing off, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you.
Thank you, the intrepid Oliver Steeds.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers now.